So is this not connected or are you connecting it? It had got connected. Okay. So I'm grateful to be here with all of you today. And I'll be speaking on the topic today of how to be committed in our spiritual life without becoming fanatical. So, do you want to try wirelessly or it had come once? Okay, let me try. You have a HDMI cable there? In my bag there's a direct Type-C to HDMI cables without adapter. Let's see if this works. Try this. Okay. So those of you who have the book, let's start reading this till now. So basically, in this book, I have taken the verses of the Bhagavad Gita as starting points or inspirations for prayer. So, and the Bhagavad Gita is the book that among all the sacred texts in our tradition I have been able to connect with the most. And many of the verses of the Gita are not just sources of wisdom for me, they're also like close personal friends for me. And if we have a very close friend, then we want to know more and more about that friend. And one way we try to know more about a friend is by meeting them in different contexts, in different situations. But this is distorted. Why is it? There's some alignment over here. It's correct, it's portrait over here. So why should it? Full screen is not coming there. It's weird. Which TV is this? Okay. No, I'm wondering whether can we do a wireless projection to the TV? Do you know which TV it is? Living room. Is this a living room TV? Living room. Okay. Do you have a remote for that or something? Something. Something should be coming. Please take out the laptop. We'll try if the laptop works. Yeah, just take out the laptop. Open it. You can turn it on. Nothing is coming. Okay. It's saying connected to external display. Why would it? If I do it like this now. It's weird. There is, whenever I travel, I have this kind of problems. So I am into words, so I have coined a word for this kind of problem. It is called Tugra Karma. There is Ugra Karma, and technology related Ugra Karma is Tugra Karma. So, but unfortunately, it's my tugra karma which causes others to suffer also. That's also, so karma is always interconnected. Let's try if this works. Is something coming now? But even now it's... Okay, how much is coming? Okay, it's somehow the resolution is not coming properly. Can you move this aside? Okay.
You're not seeing dynamic mode, so it's only seeing standard wide and full, standard full.
Okay, let me see now. If I'm writing something, fanatical, is it visible? Okay. Committed. Visible fully? Okay, only thing is the screen is smaller. Okay. So just remind me if I'm writing in too small a font there for you to see. It's connected through here. Okay. So here, to go over here and sorry about this. We have to. Where is my book? What is the page number? 64, no? 64, okay. So in this book, so I have taken, so the Gita, so what I was telling that how the Gita's verses are like close friends. So one way we come to know about our friends is by meeting them in different contexts. So when I was studying I have been writing articles in the Bhagavad Gita for the last almost 15 years, every day one article. But I felt I was being very analytical in the articles, and Srila Prabhupada's commentary, Vishwanath Chakravarti's commentary is quite devotional. So I was wondering how I could approach the Gita devotionally also. And when I was studying the Mukundamala Stotra, which is a prayer composition by King Kulashekar on the great Alvars. So there I noticed one prayer which seemed to be, to me at least, like a prayer is inspired by a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita 12.7, Krishna says, Tesham aham samuddharta mrityu samsara sagarat bhavami nachirat partha maya veshita chetasam. Krishna says, I become the swift deliverer from the ocean of material existence of those who fix their minds on me. And Kulashekar Maharaj in a prayer says, Samsara sagara nimagnam ananta deenam uddharatum arhasi hare purushottamosmi. He says, my dear Lord, in this unlimited, unending ocean of material existence, I am drowning and struggling. Please, it behooves you to lift me out of this ocean. So why behooves? Because you have promised this, O Lord, in your own words. So in that sense, so that gave me the inspiration, and from that time I have been approaching the Gita's verses to see how we could see the Gita not just as the wisdom of Krishna, but also Krishna himself manifesting. So I have taken about 122 verses from the first 6 chapters of the Gita over here in this book, and I hope to make similarly 122 more for the next 6 chapters each. That way 366 prayers for daily meditation on the Gita. So today we will take one prayer. This is 246. So you can. So in this prayer, there's a deity of Krishna, and there is a spiritual affirmation. Then there's a verse. Then I had to translate the verse in poetic form, that we get a feel of the Gita. And then there is a reflection which I would like some of you to read. So you can repeat with me. Bless me, O Lord, to be a spiritual fruit, not a religious nut. So I was doing a class on this verse. There's one devotee, one Prabhupada disciple, who is very humorous. He said, this is the best combination of Vandanam and Hasyam that I have seen. So, let's recite the verse. Yavanartha udapane sarvata samplutodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanatah. For one who knows the truth so deep, from him Vedic rites can no secret keep. As a well holds worth in a land run dry, its value fades when the rivers flow far and high. So this is the verse which comes just before the verse Karmanye Vadhikarastha in the Bhagavad Gita. And essentially Krishna is telling over here to Arjuna, don't get caught in the ritualistic understanding of this is right and this is wrong. Understand the ultimate purpose and act accordingly. So would anyone like to read the first paragraph? Yes, please.
My dear Lord, help me to gain a balanced understanding of the roles of rituals in my spiritual journey. Let me not fall into the category of those who overvalue rituals, who equate excellence in the technical details of rituals as the very essence of transcendence. When I fall into that category, I become caught in pettiness, thinking that my rituals make me superior to those who don't follow them, or those who don't observe them in the exact same way that I do. I don't want to be one of the world's many religious nuts whose self-righteousness only increases the world's hardships.
Yes. So, sorry, Mataji. I'll talk a little bit on this paragraph, then we can read the next one. Thank you. So, when I travel across the world, different devotees come to me and share some of the challenges that they are facing. And then I try to answer those challenges at that particular time. But then I also try to see if there is a way I can provide a broader context, especially that issue is not just an issue for them. It is an issue that might be happening repeatedly. So, often we may associate the word fanaticism with, say, religious fanaticism, where people go out and kill others. And yes, that is also a problem. But that is a level of extremism that most of us are unlikely to go towards. So that is not going to be a problem for us. I'll talk about that kind of fanaticism also. But for us, the fanaticism can come in a slightly different way. It's not so much physical violence as verbal violence. So I have a website where I answer questions and people get connected. So one devotee had got connected through online. Then I asked that devotee to go to the local temple. And then when I was doing a retreat in the Govardhan Eco Village, that devotee had come there. And then I asked him, how are you connected with local temple? He said, there are 2 temples over there, or 2 groups of devotees over there. And he said that there's a huge conflict among them. So now this is just, we all are different and sometimes conflicts do occur. But what was curious about this was, he said that both are congregation devotees. There's not a temple in that area. Both are congregation devotees. They have a small center where they come together. And both come on weekends, and Saturday, Sunday, they do Mangal Aarti. Weekday they don't do. Now, what happened was that one group, it comes for Mangal Aarti at 4:30 in the morning. The other group comes at 5 o'clock. So, he said, I went to both groups, and the first group, the devotees told me, the second group, Prabhupada said, Mangal Aarti means 4:30. He said, if you are not doing Mangal Aarti at 4:30, you are deviating from Prabhupada. It is not Mangal Aarti, it is Amangal Aarti. Krishna is not going to accept this worship only. How far can one go? How do you know? How can we make a judgment like that? But so this is the example of, there are some small rituals. Not the ritual themselves may not be small, but they can be made very big. There can be many reasons why it may happen that sometimes we may have to adjust things. Now, the fact that there are Grahastha devotees who are coming together for Mangal Aarti itself is laudable. What time they come is is not the most important thing at that particular time. In Radha Gopinath temple, many times our temples may be in the middle of housing localities. The Radha Gopinath temple in Chowpatty, what happened was that we used to have Mangal Aarati at 4:30, and the neighbors got very disturbed, and the neighbors launched multiple court cases against us. And now in India, people don't get into court cases, but that happened, and then it decided who's going to spend time and energy and money and all that. So we talk with them, and then we keep the temple hall door always closed in the morning, and we start the Mangal Aarati at 5 o'clock. Now it's a small adjustment that prevents an unnecessary complication of things. So this is where seen that sometimes when some devotees become committed to certain things in their personal spiritual practice, they can become very judgmental towards those who are not similarly committed, and then that can be fanatical. So I was in California about a month ago. We had gone for a walk through one garden. There were many tall trees. At that time, one thing struck me, that for a tree, there are two aspects which are important. A tree that survives for long, it has two distinct aspects. One is its roots, and the other is its shoots. Now the roots have to be deep. They have to be strong. Now it needs, as we said, something is deep rooted. So that the roots have to be deep and strong. The shoots, on the other hand, have to be flexible. Isn't it? So when storms come, if the root is not strong, it will get swept away. The tree will get swept away. At the same time, if the tree is not flexible, if the tree does not bend, then what will happen is the tree will break. And not only will the tree break, to the extent it is firm, to the extent it is tall, when it breaks, it will cause more damage around it. Isn't it? So these two aspects, like if you consider in our bhakti, Srila Prabhupada said that there are principles and there are details. So principles and details. And he said, with respect to the principles, we need to be very firm. And with respect to the details, we need to be flexible. Now, for us to grow in our spiritual life, we need to have this combination of being firm in our roots. But just as firmness in our roots alone is not enough for us to be able to sustain the storms of life. Firmness is required, but along with that, a certain level of flexibility is also required. So I'll talk about this topic of, so the principle over here, I talk about religious fruit, religious nuts and spiritual fruits. So spiritual fruits are those who are actually, if we consider, then we can have two extremes. One is that we become rigid about details. We become rigid. And the other is about principles. We become fickle. We don't want to become, that is one extreme, where if we become too rigid about details, then we will become fanatical. But if we become fickle about principles themselves, then we will just become unspiritual. We may not be connected with the tradition at all. So this will make us, we want to avoid both of these things. We want to avoid being fanatical, at the same time we want to avoid being unspiritual. There has to be something which is fixed. So that's why we have, with respect to details, we can be flexible. With respect to principles, we can be firm. So how to do this? That is what we will try to discuss today. And I'll try to discuss this in three broad parts. That I'll use the acronym ACT to explain this. The Bhagavad Gita is a book of action. So I'll talk about three broad principles. First is, we need to appreciate. Appreciate that there is a need for flexibility also. See, for most of us, the need for firmness is what is often emphasized. And we understand that way. Unless we are firm and deep-rooted in our practices, then we will not be able to will not be spiritual at all. So the part of firmness is a little easy to understand. It's emphasized. But flexibility is also important. So for example, that when Srila Prabhupada came to America, he initially wanted to start a center over here. And he had got one wealthy Indian gentleman who was ready to sponsor something. But then this person, he had a bit of he wanted to have that religious sense of religious pride or religious accomplishment. And I built a temple in America. And at that time, foreign exchange in India was very rigidly regulated. And getting that much money out of India was going to be very difficult. So Srila Prabhupada said, let us start with some small center over here. We'll just buy a storefront, or we'll rent a storefront. And we'll start something, and as things grow, then we can have a proper traditional temple. And he said, no. If you're going to do something proper, do something traditional. And then Prabhupada did not get any help from him in India, from India as such. Now Prabhupada started the 22nd Avenue was the place from where it began. If we go to New York, it's such an inconspicuous place in the neighborhood. But it may not look in any way spiritual in a traditional conception of architecture or anything like that. But still, there was immense spiritual potency over there. So now, when we build a temple, we will try to follow as much of the traditional architectural specifications as possible. We'll try to have the deities in the eastern direction. We may try to have this traditional stupa and things like that as much as is possible. But all of those may come incrementally. Now, if somebody says if these are not there, then that is not a temple at all. Well, the purpose of a temple is to help people come closer to God, come closer to Krishna. So there are some, Srila Prabhupada right in the beginning had said that the temple we want, it has to be a proper traditional temple. Then if we have a 1-0 approach, then we'll stay stuck at 0 only all the time. We'll never get to 1. Quite often it's more of instead of digital, it's analog. We gradually move. So, and now certain principles we emphasize, and the details, sometimes we may decide to bring them in gradually. Sometimes we may decide that some details may not be relevant at all. That's also possible. The idea is that if we start emphasizing details too much, then we tend to become fanatical. Now, how does fanaticism start? We could say that it is, that when I'm talking about appreciating this, that there is this principle that there are certain things which we do need to adjust. If we cannot adjust those things, we'll not be able to move forward. So, for example, in the pandemic, we all had to shift to online classes. Now, if someone had insisted that, where is the Shastric Praman that you can have satsang on Zoom? As long as you don't give me a Sanskrit shloka supporting this idea of satsang on Zoom, all this is invalid. This is apasandahatik. This is a deviation. Well, no, that is just practical. There's a principle and there's a detail. Now, of course, we could say that Sanjay hearing the conversation of the Mahabharata is some kind of Zoom. We can draw some kind of connection if we want. But we all were enlivened. We all were enlivened, no doubt, by online association also. Now, can online association enliven as much as physical association? Not entirely. There are many reasons for that, but it is not that it's a 1-0 thing. It is that generally what happens is, one reason why fanaticism comes in is we think of how do we conceive spirituality itself. So when I'm saying appreciate, that spirituality is not always digital. It is often analog. So digital means what? That it is 1 or 0. If you do this, you are spiritual, and if you are doing this, you cannot be spiritual. No, it's analog. Analog means that it is not 1 or 0. it is a range from 0 to 1, and different people may be at different places on that range. So this conception that there can be multiple levels at which spirituality can be practiced, that itself is a matter of something which requires reconceptualizing. There are many places in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna offers ladders. So for example, in 12.8 he says, just be absorbed in me. Mayeva manadhatsva may buddhim niveshaya. If you can't be absorbed in me, then he says you pay attention to me. Try to fix your mind on me. So absorption means it's spontaneous. Attention means it is more effortful. It is conscientious. He says, if you can't pay attention to me, you can't, like this is when we do our japa, at that time we are trying to pay attention. He says, if you can't pay attention, Krishna says in the next verse, do some service to me. Mat karma paramo bhava. He says, if you cannot do that, in 12.11 he says, just try to cultivate some selflessness. Try to do something for a cause beyond yourself. So Krishna is giving a multi-level approach. So this multi-level approach is an example of how spirituality is not always digital, it is often analog. So this idea that when we say analog, what does it mean? That certain principles, as long as they are being followed, certain details may be followed to a certain degree and not followed to a certain degree. But as long as the principle is being followed, one is moving upward from 0 towards 1. So this is the first point, that appreciate that spirituality is not dependent on being inflexible about everything. There are concept details which can vary according to time, place, circumstance. Yes. Mataji, would you like to read the next paragraph?
At the same time, O Lord, bless me to avoid recoiling to the other extreme, where I join the ranks of those who devalue rituals entirely, dismissing them as superstitions or pointless relics from a bygone age. Even when such people want to be spiritual, their rejection of all rituals leaves them bankrupt of any aims to tangibly progress on the spiritual path.
Yes. So one extreme is to overvalue rituals, to make them absolute. So if you consider rituals in spiritual life, one is to overvalue. If you're not doing this, you're not a devotee at all. But the other is to devalue it. If you're doing this, you're just being ritualistic. Bhakti is a matter of the heart. Yes, bhakti is a matter of the heart, but getting what is in the heart out is an art. Isn't it? And you cannot be completely arbitrary about it. Isn't it? See, rituals are there everywhere in life. When we meet people, say, we may shake hands with them. Now, why shake hands? What is the point of that? Some historic sociologists say that in the past, when people would meet, they were suspicious of each other. So, is there a gun concealed in your hand? You show your hand. Maybe that's why. That's a speculation. Nobody knows really very clearly how that came about. But when two people meet each other, they're going to express some cordiality in some way. Now, unless there is some agreed amount structure, isn't it? One person wants to shake hand, other person wants to hug. It becomes, if you don't have an agreed ritual, it becomes a little incompatible. Some cultures, people may rub their noses. So we need some kind of structure for expressing emotion, isn't it? And that unless that structure is there, clearly, it just doesn't work. So we cannot devalue rituals completely. There are rituals in every area of life. So now what is the proper understanding is we value for expression. That they are meant to express something. Now it is not just expression, there's more in that, I'll talk about that. But at a basic level what we're discussing is, if there is devotion in the heart, there's some way we express it. So for example, when we come to the temple, when we see the Lord, we offer obeisances, we bow down to the Lord. I was in Australia. We have a temple called New Govardhan. It's on top of a hill, which is a lot of Western people come there. So I was supposed to do the Sunday feast class over there. And while the Aarti was getting over and then the Mangalacharan was going on, I was coming in. There's a middle-aged Australian lady. She saw me. She says, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." She says, "When they blow the conch, why do you people kiss the floor?" Now, our rituals can sometimes seem weird to people, So, the point is that the rituals for us constitute a structure by which we are expressing devotion. But for somebody who doesn't know that, what is going on over here? So we value them for certain expression. And somebody who understands it, they may do it. Somebody who doesn't understand, they may have to figure out what is going on over here. So we want to avoid both these extremes of... So fanaticism comes when we overvalue rituals and absolutize them. Everybody has to do this. So what was the acronym I was going to discuss? ACT. So A was appreciate. Appreciate that there are details that can be adjusted. There are principles that should not be adjusted. Now, what are the principles and what are the details? For that, we need to contemplate. When Prabhupada was asked this question, how do we know what are the principles and what are the details? Prabhupada said that requires some intelligence. He did not give a universal answer to that. He did not make a list. This is detail, these are details, and these are principles. So that requires some intelligence. So we need to contemplate to understand. So what is the contemplation or what is intelligence? Srila Prabhupada gives a very nice definition of intelligence in the 10th chapter. He says intelligence means to see things in their proper perspective. So when we have a proper perspective of things. Now sometimes if say a picture is not in, sometimes if you take a selfie, the selfie is not in proper perspective, then what happens is the person who is taking the selfie, they are very close, they become very big, and all the other people become small. Isn't it? Sometimes the pictures become, people say, I'm looking too bloated over here. Take another photo. So what happens is sometimes the perspective may not be proper. So when we say proper perspective, what does it mean? That there are big things in our life, and the big things should be seen as big. And the small things in our life should be seen as small. So, to see things in a proper perspective means to understand what are the principles. Those are the big things, let me keep them as big. And the small things, and let me keep them as small. So, now, what is a big thing and what is a small thing? To understand this, that we can consider that there is, for each person when you are practicing bhakti, there is the tradition that we are a part of. And the tradition tells that certain things are big. And then we as individuals are also trying to practice bhakti. And for us, certain things are big and certain things are small. Okay. So, now what happens? That both these things have to be considered. The tradition also has to be considered. If some tradition says something is a big thing, it is, we have to consider seriously. But we are individuals. Each one of us may experience our connection with Krishna strongly in a particular way. And then that becomes a big thing for us. So, let me take a couple of examples to illustrate this point. That what is a big thing at one particular time may become a small thing another time. And it may vary from, as I said, this contemplate, we're talking about big thing and small thing. That there is the point of desha, kala and patra. There's time, place and candidate. Desha, kala, patra. That has to be considered to understand what is a big thing and what is a small thing. So, in our scriptures, how to approach spirituality itself, there are two distinct approaches given. If we consider, this is the world and we are in the world. And this is the spiritual world. And it is Krishna who is at the top of the spiritual world. Of course, Krishna is everywhere, but he's also at the topmost abode of the spiritual world. So one way to approach spirituality is to leave this world and go. The other is to go through the world to Krishna. The Bhagavatam is giving us this approach. The Gita is giving this approach. The Bhagavatam is spoken to Parikshit Maharaj, who has already been cursed to die in 7 days and who has accepted that curse. He has accepted that could he have retaliated, could he have tried to counter, could he have tried to do some yajna? Maybe he could have, but he has made a decision that I am not going to counter it, I am going to accept it. So when that is what he has decided, then the entire storyline of the Bhagavatam focuses on helping him to reinforce his decision. So the various stories that are told in the Bhagavatam, they may be of Dhruva Maharaj heroically gaining a great kingdom and all that, but they all culminate in death and a glorious success at the time of death. Even Vritrasura also. Now, there may be mishaps along the way, there may be adversities and things like happen to say Bharat Maharaj, but the stories are about how to turn away from the world and go toward Krishna. Now, that is for Parikshit Maharaj's context. But if the Gita is spoken to Arjuna, and Arjuna's context is different. Arjuna is a warrior. He is tasked with doing an important responsibility of protecting the world from adharma. And Krishna tells Arjuna, you cannot renounce the world. You have to do your dharma in the world. So now both are teaching the same message of spirituality. That both are teaching how we can act in a consciousness of service to Krishna. But there are different ways in which we are approaching. Say some devotee gets cancer. Now, cancer can be quite a devastating diagnosis. Now, the word cancer itself is scary. Now, there are many different kinds of cancer. Some are more easily curable than others. But somebody gets cancer. Now, if somebody is young, maybe 25, 30, 40, not very young, but not really old, the 35, 40, 45, then if somebody is getting some serious disease and they say, okay, I just want to leave the world. I'll go to Vrindavan, I'll chant and I'll leave my body. We may tell them, there's no need to do that. If it is only stage 1 or stage 2, you can fight against it. You have a life ahead of you. And just the cancer diagnosis is not a terminal sentence. You can fight against it. So that time we may say that you go the Gita way over there. Fight against it. There's so much service you can do in the world. But suppose somebody is already say 80, 85, 90 and they have battled against cancer 2-3 times and again they get cancer. Then they may say, okay, I want to fight it out. You may say, now if they want to, we can encourage them. But if they are inclined, okay, I've had enough now. Ultimately this body, how long is it going to live? I want to just go to Vrindavan and I want to focus on bhakti. And that's a fair enough approach. Now, to tell somebody who is 85 or 90, come on, fight. If that is not according to their particular mood, that is not according to that situation, it may be valid but not valid for them. But somebody who is 35, 40, 45, and we tell them, that, and they get cancer, like Parikshit Maharaj, you just hear about Krishna, and Parikshit Maharaj had 7 days, we don't know how much time you have, you focus on hearing. Ultimately, we all have to die. Now that is valid, but not valid for them. No, so the point is, again, age is only one factor I am considering over here. My point is that there is not necessarily one way that the principles of bhakti can be applied in life. And in our own tradition itself, the two defining texts of our tradition, the Gita and the Bhagavatam, these two distinct approaches are presented. So now, is renouncing the world a principle or a detail? It depends on when one person is. If somebody is young in the prime of their youth, they just have a family. At that time, renouncing the youth, it's a principle, but for them at that particular point, it may be a detail. Isn't it? That's not what has to be emphasized the most at that particular time. We can practice bhakti there is, when we are acting in the world, there are two ways. We can just get entangled in the world. So we can be, if there's some object in this world, we get caught in it and we get entangled. But we can not be entangled, but we can be engaged in the world. Engaged in the world for serving Krishna. There's engaged, if you want to have a rhyme, there can be encaged. So we can be encaged by the world. But just acting in the world does not necessarily mean we are engaged in the world. We can be engaged in a mood of service to Krishna also. So one factor in determining which is the right thing, that is the candidate. What is the, as a time, place, circumstance, what is the particular situation of the individual. So what is a big thing and what is a small thing? We need to contemplate to understand. And when we are contemplating, within our tradition itself, if you will see the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada. Now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with Pratap Rudra. Pratap Rudra was the king and the king was eager to meet. And Mahaprabhu refused to meet him repeatedly. If you consider Srila Prabhupada with Indira Gandhi. Prabhupada on the tour of America and we got the opportunity to meet Indira Gandhi. He cut short his tour and came back to India. Now, was Srila Prabhupada not following the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? The actions were completely opposite, isn't it? And on top of that, Indira Gandhi was not only the head of state, she was also female head of state. So, Prabhupada could have said, I don't want to meet. But if you consider, it's not just a matter of externals. What is Mahaprabhu's consideration? If you see, the action might be opposite. Action, he refused to meet. And Srila Prabhupada was, you could say, he adjusted to meet. He adjusted his own tour to meet. So what is the difference? If we consider, Mahaprabhu is not saying it's a cardinal principle. What he says is, it's a matter of public perception and reputation. Now, what is a sannyasi doing hobnobbing with wealthy people and kings? So, now if we see in the Ramayana and Mahabharata, there are times when sages interact with kings, but sages have some emergency. Vishwamitra comes to the court of Dashrath Maharaj. And everybody is stunned when he comes there. There's some emergency, that's why he's coming. And sometimes sages also go and, the kings also go and meet sages. So it's not that there's no interaction. But generally it is a purposeful interaction. So Mahaprabhu said, his main concern over there at that time was reputation. That people will think that this kind of a king, a sannyasi interacting with the king would spoil the reputation. That is, the king, the sannyasi is not really renounced. The sannyasi is attached. So, in today's world, it is that, so in a culture where sannyasis are already respected, and yeah, kings are of course respected, they are having power, there sannyasis and kings coming together, it may have a particular effect. But in today's world, often people think, what are sannyasis doing? What are renunciates doing? People think that these are either irrelevant or they are parasites in society or whatever. So in today's world, if a sannyasi meets a head of state, that is not going to spoil the reputation of sannyasi. That is going to actually enhance the reputation, isn't it? So, again, what is the big thing over here? The big thing is, how can people's Krishna consciousness be fostered? So, if meeting a particular person is going to enhance people's Krishna consciousness, we do that. If they're not going to enhance, then we avoid that. So, this is a clear example of a change based on adjusting. So something is small, something is big. So we need to consider, according to time, place, circumstance, what is more important and what is less important. Now, of course, scriptures give us certain things. Say, for example, chanting of the holy names of Yoga Dharma. We do certain level of deity worship. We come for satsang. There are 5 principles which are given in the Bhakti Samava Sindhu. That is where bhakti resides. So hearing the Bhagavatam is there, associating with devotees is there, going to a holy place. All these are important principles. So scripture gives us certain principles which are important, and in our own context, we also have to see what is important. So now our movement is more or less spread all over the world, and we have a powerful non-institutional presence in the Middle East. What do I mean non-institutional? That in the Middle East, because of the Islamic ethos over there, there's no, in very few places, with living in few places, in most places it's not possible to practice bhakti publicly. But still, there are lots of devotees, and there's very vibrant practice of bhakti. That one more, because the Islamic culture is a bit more conservative, maybe even orthodox and radical, there's not much public access to blatant sense gratification. It is there, of course, but not. So what happens is, for many Indians, many Hindus who go there, they just cannot mix with the mainstream culture, and that's why they start looking for their cultural roots even more. You know, our culture is often like our blood. What do I mean by that? See, it is only when the blood starts bleeding out then we notice it. While it is just bleeding, going around internally, we don't even notice it. So it's only when the culture starts getting lost, they start, oh, this culture is important. It has to be valued. It has to be preserved. So for many Indians, many Hindus over there, what happens is that they become more vibrant in the practice of bhakti. Now we can choose to be inflexible. You may say that, okay, no, we will go out and distribute books over there. You distribute books one day, and then after that you will be in jail. Devotees are so resourceful. We do Rath Yatras also over there. But like devotees hire the biggest hall, and their idea is you cannot do public practice. Private means if it's indoors, you can do whatever you want. The devotees hire a hall, and in the hall, the Rath goes round and round and round. And it's quite enthusiastic. So even as renunciates, when we go there, now we cannot go in saffron over there. So we adjust and we wear civil clothes while going in, but after going there, we do programs. So now somebody said, no, this is inflexible. Yeah, we can say it's important. But what is more important? Is it wearing a particular dress or fostering a particular consciousness? So now somebody said, no, I know a couple of preachers who say that, I will not go to the Middle East till they change and allow us to go in saffron. Well, maybe things will change and maybe that will happen. We don't know. And so now I respect the sentiment of those devotees, those who feel that way. There's nothing, I won't say it's wrong. But what would be wrong is to absolutize that. That is what everybody has to do. Now, those who refuse to wear civil clothes, they are not serious devotees. No, it's not like that. So the idea over here is that for the purpose of sharing Krishna consciousness, practicing Krishna consciousness, even receiving Krishna consciousness, there are certain things which are important, and certain other things may be important, but they may not be that important at that particular time. So adjusting is quite important accordingly. So we could say, what is a big thing? It depends on Desha, Kala, Patra. Now, I'll give a couple of examples. So again, I'll making one. I talk about Desha, Kala, Patra, but then I'll also qualify it. Say now, in India, I come from Maharashtra. In Maharashtra, Ganesh Puja is a very big thing. There is one devotee one young devotee who became a brahmachari later. So he had come, his family, the generations of Ganesh Puja was happening. And then, what happened was that he became a devotee. And generally, in the first, say, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, there is religious psychology called the zeal of the new convert. I know everything. Everybody else is my illusion. I am right. And I'm going to enlighten everyone. Or if people are not ready to be enlightened, I will reject them. It's like that. So he, in this phase, his parents called him to their home for the Ganesh Puja. And in Ganesh Puja, there is this modak that is offered to Ganesh. So he was given that, and here are devotees should take only Krishna Prasad. We worship only Krishna. So he took the modak, he put it in his mouth, and said, "I want to go somewhere." He excused himself and he went near a window and spit out the modak. And at that time, one relative was coming from outside. And the modak didn't fall on that person, but they saw the modak falling out. Now, normally in any culture, so somebody spitting something out of the window itself is odd. And then they saw what he had spit out. The Ganesh Puja became a Kurukshetra after that. And it's naturally understandable at that point. So, his parents told him, these Hare Krishna, they're all fanatical. And, they are actually taking you away from your tradition. They're making you intolerant. And he had a lot of difficulty in practicing his bhakti. It took years for his parents to become pacified and to understand. So the idea over here is that at that particular point, if throughout the year we are eating Krishna Prasad, if we take one morsel of food, we can chant Hare Krishna in the mind and we take it. It is not that our dharma is going to be destroyed by that. So is it a big thing? Well, in that particular context, agitating the family will become a very big thing, isn't it? So we have to consider the candidate. Now, for somebody in whose family there is no Ganesh Puja, when I give this example, especially if in the audience there are devotees who are non-Indians, for them it's like the whole concept of devatas is just a weird thing from Hindu culture. All the worship of the devatas is basically Maya. And there's one devotee who told me that the advantage of being born in the West is that, what did he say? How many devatas are there according to folklore? 33? So he says, 33 crore diversions to Krishna are avoided. Now, are they diversions to Krishna? Well, it depends. No, they keep people within the broader framework of dharma. Generally, if somebody is worshipping Shiva or Ganesh or Durga, it's not that they reject Krishna worship. They still have an appreciation for Krishna worship. When the devotees were in Kolkata, when Durga Puja was going on, they asked Prabhupada, who is better? Are the Durga worshippers better or Christians who worship God better, the Supreme better? So now Prabhupada gave an answer that may not be an absolute answer, but Prabhupada said that the worshippers of Durga are better because they are in the house of the Vedas. Now, house of the Vedas means what? See, for somebody who is coming from an Abrahamic religion, they might be devoted to God, but there are a lot of cultural and conceptual barriers that they need to overcome. Now, it doesn't absolutize that it will be more difficult for them, but the point is that for somebody who has no conception of what the Devta worship is, they may think that's a small thing, just say no to that food. But for somebody who is in that tradition, it may not be a small thing. That's why we have to consider, as I gave now 3 examples I gave: Kala, Desha and Patra. So Kala, I gave the example of the age, Parikshit Maharaj. Now Kala, I gave the example of cancer. Cancer in youth. It's coming over there? Okay. So cancer in youth or old age. Desha, I gave the example of the Middle East. And Patra could mean it's a person's family traditions, whatever they might be. For somebody who is, say, born in the West, maybe the Jewish tradition, they may have Hanukkah, or then somebody may have Christianity, they may have Christmas, and they may practice in a particular way. And they may want to practice some aspects of that, and that's fair enough. Somebody may practice Thanksgiving, but we will not cut a turkey and eat it at that time. So we may do something else. So some aspects can be adapted. So what is a small thing and what is a big thing can vary from person to person. So being committed means, so I'll just make one last point about this before we move to the last part. So basically now if you consider, this is Krishna at the center. Now there are different people who may come by different paths to Krishna. And when somebody comes by a particular path to Krishna, then that is the way they are experiencing Krishna. So what do I mean by path to Krishna? Say somebody comes primarily from the cultural pathway. Cultural pathway means that maybe they grew up in a culture where they used to go to temple, there would be kirtan, there would be puja. And when they come to a temple, they say, oh, all this, our culture is there over here. Mhm. Now for them, when they come by that cultural pathway, the cultural details become very important. And if any cultural detail is off, then they get very agitated. One day, one devotee, I was in the temple hall chanting, and one devotee before that, can I talk with you? I said, do you really need to talk right now? He said, right now, if I don't talk, my whole japa will be spoiled for today. So I was thinking, if I talk, my japa will be spoiled. And I said, okay. So he said, I'm so agitated. He said, what happened? He said, just, there was Tulsi Aarti, and the devotee was doing Tulsi Aarti. Instead of moving the diya 7 times, he moved it 9 times. I was thinking, why were you even counting that? But what may happen is, somebody, for that person, that becomes very important. Mm-hmm. So, now we can laugh at it because we are from not in that context. But for somebody who comes from the cultural pathway, the cultural details become very important. Because sometimes for those people, doing these things exactly in this way, they feel this is how I am showing my seriousness to Krishna. This is how it is, through these details, through attention to these details, I am actually expressing the concreteness of my commitment to Krishna, of my devotion to Krishna. For the social paths, for them, the cultural specifics become very important. And that's fair enough. If they are coming from the cultural pathway and the cultural specifics are important, that means we cannot tell them that that is a small thing, that is a big thing for them. Sometimes what happens is, if we are agitated about something and we tell someone and they say, don't take it so seriously. Then what happens? First we are agitated about thing, and then we are agitated with the person who is not agitated. So it just becomes worse at that time. So for that person, it may be a big thing, and they can individually understand it's a big thing for me. But I can't make it a big thing for myself, for others. If we are doing Aarti, you try to do it in a very precise way. But don't impose it on others. So like that, for some people may come from the social pathway. Social pathway means that I want to hang out. Not hang out is it's an informal word. But okay, you could say, I want to associate with, spend time with good people. This is the kind of place where I would like my children to grow. The values here are nice, the people here are nice. So somebody may come from the social pathway. And yes, in the community of devotees, there is a certain level of etiquette, a certain standard of behavior that is there. But if somebody comes from a social pathway and their primary impetus, devotees are so nice. And then one day they come to a temple and they see one devotee is yelling at another devotee and screaming. And I remember one devotee who this happened in California. The temple leader is a non-Indian. And he's a very dedicated devotee, but he's quite a aggressive devotee. So he had got angry with someone and he was yelling at that person. And see, normally even when we get angry and we yell, in cultured society we will not use any swear words. So somehow this devotee in his anger spoke one or two swear words. Those are very common in Western culture, mainstream culture also, not just Western culture. But these devotees, they are completely shocked. How can somebody in the temple speak like this? And then when I had gone to California, I used to stay in their place. So then they called me and said, we are thinking whether we should even go to this temple or not now. I told them what exactly happened, and I told them. Then I know the temple leader, so I said, can I talk with him? He says, okay, if you want to, you can talk. So then, and I called him, he's a good friend of mine. So I talked with him, and I talked about various other things also. We regularly are in touch. And then he himself was aware. So he used to speak certain words, and then he saw that these devotees were there, he noticed their impact. At that time he was very angry, just continued on. But then he talked with me, and then he said, this has happened. And I also told them they are very upset, they are very agitated by this. And then he said, that actually I grew up in a very tough neighborhood. It's a high crime kind of neighborhood he grew up in. And he said that, this kind of one or two word that I use, it is in the past, there would not be one or two sentences without any word like this. So he said that from where I am coming, there's a huge transformation. And sometimes when you're talking with people, and say in that particular context, he told me that he was talking with a Western person who was an employee, not a devotee, and was supposed to do something, and that person had repeatedly been irresponsible in doing that. See, sometimes to convey a particular point at a particular group of people, we have to speak in a particular way. But he said, I realized that this will jar people's sensibilities. Now, yes, there's certain language which you may consider unacceptable, and that is true. It is unacceptable, but at the same time, how devotees talk or how devotees behave, it's important. But how devotees behave does not change the fact that Krishna is God, isn't it? So this is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. It is not the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. It is not that Krishna Consciousness is already present over there and we just go and just pick it up. It is that for Krishna Consciousness, it provides us resources for cultivating Krishna Consciousness. So everybody here is striving to be Krishna conscious. So something at the social level, how people behave, may be very jarring for one person, and for somebody else it may not be that big a thing. So like that, what is a small thing and what is a big thing can vary from person to person also. So we understand that for connecting with Krishna, this is like a baseline requirement. This has to be there. Otherwise, how are you connecting with Krishna? How can you even consider yourself a cultured human being? What to speak of a spiritual human being? That may be true from a particular perspective. So what is a big thing for us? We keep it a big thing. But it may not be that big a thing for someone else. And that brings me to the last part. What is that? Are we discussing? T. Would anyone like to read I think the third paragraph is the last paragraph in the book. We quickly read that. Okay. Anyone? Yes, please.
Help me, O Lord, to approach rituals intelligently as valuable and even vital means for spiritual growth. Let me always remember that the fruit of such spiritual growth is a heart that is humble and compassionate, not an ego that is self-righteous and judgmental. Bless me, O Lord, to become such a spiritual fruit, one who relishes and radiates the divine joy that comes from an authentic connection with you, the source of the ultimate joy.
Yes. So, last T is tap. What do we tap? Tap the means by which we connect with Krishna. Those may not necessarily be the means by which others connect with Krishna. So here we can have an ego and we can have a heart. Of course we have both, but one becomes more prominent at times. So the ego, the heart can be humble. Humble by actually coming in the presence of Krishna. Understanding that Krishna is so great, Krishna is so majestic, Krishna is so astonishing. We feel humbled that such a great Lord has chosen to make me a part of His path, His process, is with me, is revealing Himself to me. So we can become humble, or our ego can become self-righteous. That this is what has to be done, and this is what I am doing, so I am such a good person. I was in California, I saw a t-shirt on a young man. He says, my humility is my greatest quality. So, we can become proud of our humility also, So we can experience Krishna, and if you experience Krishna, that is wonderful. But we don't have to become proud of that. So self-righteous means this is the only way it has to be done. With respect to others, our heart can be compassionate. Compassionate means the way I have experienced Krishna, I feel sorry for others who are not experiencing Krishna. And I want them to experience Krishna also. But judgmental means that, oh, this person is not doing this right, that person is not doing that right, this person is doing this wrong, doing that wrong. So basically, quite often when the heart is humble and compassionate, the focus is on Krishna. Krishna is so great, and Krishna wants me to share his message with others. So when we have that attitude, then we can be fixed in the things that help us experience Krishna. But we can also understand that Krishna is bigger than me. Krishna is bigger than my experience of him. So Krishna may actually reveal himself to some other devotee in some other way. And that devotee, I may think, is not very serious in the practice of bhakti. But that devotee may be serious, but in some other way. So, now, I'll just give 2-3 examples of how, when we say tap what? How Krishna reveals himself to us. How we experience some spiritual strength. How we come closer to Krishna. So, whatever happens, that we tap that. How Krishna reveals himself to us. And let others similarly tap it. Don't insist that the way I am experiencing Krishna is the only way everyone has to experience Krishna. So when you say fanatic, Krishna talks about this in 18.22 in the Bhagavad Gita. He talks about knowledge in the mode of ignorance. Yattu tutsnavad ekasmin. To make one thing into everything. So fanatic means what? What works for me. What works for me. Now this means, by this I feel closer to Krishna. By this I experience Krishna. What works for me is the only thing that will work for everyone. So fanaticism is basically extrapolating from our experience and then universalizing and absolutizing our experience. So one devotee may fast Nirjalo Ekadashi and they may feel, yes, I am doing serious tapasya and I feel I'm doing something for Krishna. At least once a fortnight, by doing serious fasting, I am doing some tangible tapasya for Krishna. So in the Brahmacharya ashram, we would have a light-hearted thing. He said that there is the Nirjal club and there is the Nirlajja club. So Nirjal is those who fast, Nirlajja is those who are shameless. So now it's not that those who don't fast Nirjal, they are shameless. So it is a light-hearted way of saying things. But somebody becomes very proud, I fast Nirjal. And then they are fasting even without taking any food or water. But throughout the day, looking at the kitchen to see who is going in and who is eating. If that's what they are doing, then the result will be their body may be fasting, but their ego is feasting. And they will not really go closer to Krishna. So we tap those activities that take us closer to Krishna. And then for others, we leave it. It's between them and Krishna. Now, of course, if we are a part of a community, we are leaders of a community, within our particular circle, we may want to set a particular mood. We want to have particular standards. And these are the big things for us. That's fair enough. But that does not mean that bhakti has to be limited only to the way we are practicing it. So others can still practice bhakti and they may also be serious devotees, but that just may not work in this particular community. Krishna's and this particular. So in the Bhagavad Gita, not in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhakti Samad Sindhu, there is this principle of like-minded association. Not just association, but like-minded association. Sajatiya Sangha. So why like-minded association? Why like-minded can be many different things. One aspect of like-minded is, this is that what, it's not like intelligent. Is there an adjective for intelligence? Intelligent, like intelligent. No, it doesn't work. But anyway, it's the focus on the more on the mind, not the intelligence over here. Why? Because some of us, even our mind, naturally gravitates towards some things, considering them big and considering some things to be small. So I saw once a cartoon one devotee showed me, multitasking in bhakti. What was that? One person was doing arti and looking at the phone while doing arti. You know, now nobody would do that seriously. Now sometimes we may say that okay, we may not do that, but if we are doing a chanting and some phone comes, we will look at the phone. Now, are the two the same thing? Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that when we are doing arti, we are directly coming in the presence of Krishna. Especially if we are personally doing the rituals. At that time, we'll keep our phone aside. Chanting also, ideally speaking, we should keep our phone aside. But sometimes some emergency might be there. We might look at our phone. That's okay. But the thing is that like-minded association means what is a big thing and what is a small thing. That will vary from person to person. But broadly speaking, if we are associating with devotees who understand, whose understanding of what is a big thing and what is a small thing is similar to ours, then we can be relatively comfortable in that association. We will feel accepted in that association. That's why within Srila Prabhupada's movement, if we consider Srila Prabhupada said he built a house in which the whole world can live. We have the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In this, there are many different rooms. And not everyone can stay in every one of these rooms. Now, we might find that we fit in one particular room the best. Now, that doesn't mean the other rooms are not in the house of Krishna consciousness. They may be, but they may be in a ways where I cannot be there. On the other hand, now they may feel that somebody else might feel this is a room in the house of Krishna consciousness in which I cannot be there. So like-minded association, this is a room in which I can be comfortable. That I feel comfortable. Not comfortable in the sense of being in a comfort zone, but comfortable in the sense that I don't feel constantly insecure, worried, agitated. I feel peaceful enough so that I can focus on Krishna. So I may be comfortable here, and another person may be comfortable in another, in Krishna consciousness. So we can have different expressions of Krishna consciousness, and these don't have to fight with each other. That the world is large enough and Krishna is large enough that different devotees who want to approach Krishna in different ways can coexist. So when we tap means tap the way Krishna is revealing himself to me. Tap the way we feel closer to Krishna, and let others tap their way, the way they come closer to Krishna. So Prabhupada told us we should cooperate. Now, Allah will be shown by how we cooperate. Now, one cooperation is also a spectrum. Sometimes we cooperate and sometimes we cooperate. Cooperate means I operate here, you operate there. We all have our kshetra and we function accordingly. And that's Krishna is large enough to include different devotees with different backgrounds, different seekers with different backgrounds, and everybody can keep moving towards Krishna. So I'll summarize what I discussed. Our topic was how to be committed, not fanatical. And what was the acronym I discussed? ACT, A-C-T. What was A? Appreciate. Appreciate that in bhakti there are, we talked about the example of a tree. Yes, the tree is like our bhakti. The roots have to be strong. So the roots are like the principles. At the same time, the shoot has to be flexible. And those are like the details. So Srila Prabhupada himself said that both are important, that there is a difference between both of those. So we can say we can make the details as rigid, and that will be a problem. And we can become fickle about the principles. That will also be a problem. This is similar to broadly like overvaluing rituals and devaluing rituals. So in between, we understand that what we want to do is that we want to keep the principles as firm. Principles are the big things. We want to be firm about those. And with respect to details, we can be flexible. So C was what? Contemplate. So now the question comes up, what are the principles and what are details? For that we need to contemplate And one understanding of intelligence is to see things in proper perspective. That means to understand what are the big things and to keep those big things big, and to understand what are the small things and to keep those small things small. And we look in tradition itself how we have to consider Desha, Kala and Patra. So I talked about example from the Middle East for Desha, Kala, the age when somebody gets a particular disease, and Patra could refer to various somebody's family tradition and things like that. So Desha, Kala, Patra we need to consider to decide what is a small thing and what is a big thing. And by contemplating, each individual is in a particular place. So we understand that different people they need to be trained to understand what is a small thing and what is a big thing. Last T was tap. So tap, what is a big thing for us so that we can go towards Krishna. And in this tap I talked about how for each one of us we may need to recognize that, let me put this over here, that when we approach Krishna, that if Krishna is in the center, that different people may approach Krishna from different pathways. Somebody may approach from a cultural pathway, somebody may approach from a social pathway. So then what is it that is attracting them to Krishna? That will determine what is a big thing for them. So tap, the big thing that takes us to the ultimate big thing. The ultimate big thing is Krishna, the ultimate reality. So now for each one of us, we need to understand what is it that is likely to take me to Krishna. So in that connection, we discussed how in the Krishna consciousness movement, there can be many different rooms, so different centers with different ethos. So we need like-minded association. So where we find out like-minded means that what are the big things, we share our understanding of big and small things. So when this is shared, then each one of us can naturally, comfortably practice bhakti. And if somebody else is not agreeing with that, that doesn't mean that they are a bad person. We talked about fanatic is one who says that what works for me is the only thing that can work for everyone. And then we think like that, then we will end up becoming not humble and compassionate, but self-righteous and judgmental towards everyone. So by recognizing that Krishna is bigger than us and Krishna can guide, Krishna can reach different people in different ways, we can be committed to the way Krishna is reaching us or we are reaching Krishna, and we can avoid being fanatical by being open to the fact that Krishna may reach others in different ways and others may reach Krishna in different ways. So let's conclude once more with this prayer. You can repeat after me. Bless me, O Lord, to be a spiritual fruit, not a religious nut. Shri Krishna Bhagavan ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
I really appreciated your point on how to harmonize different approaches to Krishna consciousness, see them as part of the wider Krishna that is known. One specific doubt I have is that I regularly heard emphasis on a specific set of standards and lifestyle that Srila Prabhupada has recommended, especially near the end of his appearance or of his pastimes. That near the end of his life, from I don't know specifically what date it was, but maybe like 1973 or 75 onwards, that a large percentage of Prabhupada's instructions were about Varnashram Dharma, and specifically about farm communities. Obviously, this creates a narrower spectrum of what's considered proper and bona fide Krishna consciousness and what it means to be a follower of Srila Prabhupada. So I was wondering if you could speak on this specific topic of it. Prabhupada himself recommending a narrower set of standards and lifestyle for the proper application of Krishna consciousness, especially in the Western world.
Okay. So, it is true that in the second half of the period of ISKCON's existence, during Srila Prabhupada's manifested presence, he did emphasize Varnashram. Now, at the same time, Srila Prabhupada did not clearly give a pathway to establish Varnashram. Farm community was one thing, but Prabhupada basically talked about that there are 4 divisions of society, and that people should be able to practice spiritual life peacefully. So if you see with respect to Varnashram, this is a big topic and I'll try to keep it as short as possible, but it's also a matter of principles and details. So Prabhupada talked about different things. Say for example, one thing he talked about is social division. When you talk about Varnashram, that people should be trained as Brahmanas, people should be trained as Kshatriyas, whatever. Social division and the corresponding training for that social division. The second thing he talked about is, say, as you said, farm communities. Now, when he talked about farm communities, his emphasis there was on more like simple living and high thinking. That you avoid all the complexity of material life and you focus on practicing bhakti. You'll have time to practice bhakti more. A third thing that he talked about was sometimes, this is not that common. Now again, this is not an exhaustive analysis of Prabhupada's statements, that he talked about the moral degradation in society. And he said that Varnashram will provide a social order which will counter the moral degradation. Moral degradation could be that, say, children are not raised properly, families are not staying together. The social now why families don't stay together? There are many reasons for that. But Prabhupada would talk about that, and he could offer sometimes as a Varnashram could be a solution for that. Now, there is this tendency that we can take Srila Prabhupada's statements and we can again overemphasize them or overvalue them or devalue them. So, for example, let's take about it. Say Prabhupada, for those who are very much into Varnashram, they may say, Prabhupada said 50% of my work is remaining. Now, yes, he did say that, but Prabhupada has never put that in his purports. If it was really that important, would Prabhupada not have put it anywhere in his purports? And when Prabhupada says 50% of my work is remaining, Srila Prabhupada also said, what I have given is enough for you to go back to Godhead. Does he mean that, what I have given is only will take you 50% back to Godhead and other thing you have to find out? No, that was not his emphasis. So, Prabhupada's statements do need to be seen in context. So, now if we look at this, each of these, now trying to do social division, how are we going to do that? Now, I know many devotees who grew up in Gurukuls and they were assigned a particular Varna by the Guru over there. And they were just not that Varna. Somebody was told, you are a Brahmana, so you memorize shlokas. And you memorize shlokas and learn mantras. That miserable experience. That was not, no, I'm not blaming the Gurus over there. It's very difficult to identify the Varna. It may take some time. So how exactly is that, if he thinks Varnashram is social division, how is that going to be done? Now if you consider Varnashram means farm communities. Okay, so the point of farm communities, of course, yes, we would like to protect cows. It's a natural way of living, that is all, it's all good. But Prabhupada himself also wanted temples in the cities. They gave the example that where should a hospital be located? When somebody asked him, where should a temple be? He says, temple is like a hospital. And the hospital should be where there are the most sick people. So temple should be where there people are more materialistic, and that's in the cities. So Prabhupada did build most of his temples in the cities. Now, with respect to farm communities, see, simple living and high thinking, that was the purpose. However, for everyone, again, Desh Kal Patra, time, place, candidate comes in. If somebody has lived with a certain level of comforts and amenities in a city since their childhood, in an urban setting, if they start going and living in a rural setting, it is that there is, all the thinking is about living only at that time. We don't have any running water. If you have to respond to nature, you have to go this far. You don't have this electricity. How to manage the cold? So, sometimes for some people, that attempt for simple living actually makes their living more complicated. Not complicated. Now, in cities, the living is complicated in the sense that there are so many global changes can affect us here and there. But there are certain logistics that are convenient also. So, the idea over here is, let's say, if this is the transcendental, and say this is the, at the material level, there are different kinds of arrangements that are there. So, these arrangements could be in terms of politics. We could have democracy. Some places there is theocracy. Some places there is oligarchy. Some places there is communism. Now, traditionally, if we consider, okay. So similarly, so now traditionally there is monarchy. Wherever what examples we see in scriptures, monarchy. Now, is it that to practice spirituality, say if monarchy was what was the standard in spiritual life, the standard in scriptures. So through a kingdom that is based on monarchy, people moved spiritually upwards. Now, do we need to re-establish monarchy to practice spirituality? How much is social change required for bringing about spiritual change? So similarly, with respect to there could be like political organization of society, there could be social organization. So Varnashram is one way of there. Now capitalism is there, socialism is there, whatever words you want to use for it. So is it that anybody from any other social arrangement has to come here and this is the only way up? Or this is broadly, I'm not saying this is a resolved debate in our movement, but the other is that, okay, whatever be the form over there, from wherever you are, Krishna can be accessed. So, broadly speaking, Srila Prabhupada did emphasize Varnashram. And Varnashram, it is definitely important that some devotees, that because there was Prabhupada's instruction, some devotees may feel inspired by it, driven by it, and they try something for it. At the same time, how many robust working models of Varnashram do we have? Either in terms of like satisfactory, productive organization of society from this world, or abundant spiritual advancement from the devotional perspective that has resulted. There are not so many models right now. So definitely some devotees feel inspired, they can focus on Varnashram, and once a model comes up, everybody wants to be Krishna conscious. If a working model happens, others may also adopt it. So did Srila Prabhupada start the International Society for Varnashram re-establishment? No. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness. In the 7 purposes of ISKCON, Varnashram is not mentioned anywhere over there. I'm not saying it's not important, but it is, for us, the society is not for Varnashram, it is for Krishna consciousness. And yes, traditionally Varnashram was a way by which people could practice Krishna consciousness. Now today, is Varnashram the way? Maybe it is, we don't know. But we have to, somebody has to do it, others have to see it, it has to pass the test of time and sustain itself, and others may adopt it. So there can be many different ways in which different devotees may try to be Krishna conscious from wherever they are. And those attempts also need to be appreciated. So one of the biggest challenges in life is that, when we become very serious about something, it becomes very difficult to appreciate people who are not serious about that thing. Isn't it, So we just start devaluing those people. And that's you could say at one level that's just normal human psychology, but that is also the pathway to fanaticism. So my understanding is Varnashram is one important pathway toward Krishna consciousness. And that pathway, Srila Prabhupada talked about it. We need to, as devotees, explore that pathway, develop that pathway, and share that pathway. But sometimes what is happening is that we don't have a robust model for that. And in the name of Varnashram, other pathways are being blocked. Because we are supposed to follow Varnashram, you cannot do this, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. No, wherever people are, from there they practice bhakti and move ahead in their life. So, now, with respect to culture, how much is, say, okay, I'm making this answer a little long, kindly excuse me for this, but it's an important point. Say, in the world there are different cultures. There's American culture, there's Australian culture, there is South American culture, there's South America also Mexican culture, so many cultures are there. And there is Indian culture. Now this is spirituality, this is Krishna. Now, is it that everyone from all cultures has to come to Indian culture and then they will go to Krishna? Or is it from whichever culture they are, they will go towards Krishna? Now, it depends. If you consider what does culture mean? You can say culture can lead to food, it can lead to clothing, it can refer to nomenclature. So there are many other things in it, but let's take these three things. Now, with respect to food, more or less, our movement has accepted that we can offer different kinds of food to Krishna. And in many ways, it is rather that I came to know what is chow mein after coming to ISKCON. Isn't it? So, is it that somebody who is born in China or somebody who is born in Mexico, they have to start liking and regularly eating Indian cuisine so that they can become devotees? Well, maybe, maybe not. That's not required. The way it is de facto functioning is that it's not what is emphasized that much. So now with respect to clothing, yes, we have a traditional attire that we wear generally, at least when we are doing temple worship. Now, how much should that particular attire be emphasized for everyone? I think that's a matter of discussion. At least in the temple, we emphasize it to some degree, but we don't emphasize it absolutely everywhere. Even during Srila Prabhupada's times, those devotees are grahasthas, they were not wearing that attire. So now with respect to nomenclature, we are giving, there was one spiritual master in the history of our movement who started giving Western initiated names. There are three sisters who got initiated. They got them Rose, Lotus and Daffodil. They are initiated names. Now, that was an experiment that was short-lived. Now we are, when people get initiated, we are giving them traditional names based on our tradition. But almost any devotee who is doing Western outreach, they practically never tell their traditional name fully. Like, whatever, because the names are so long, people just don't get the name. So when I do Western outreach, I used to introduce people to Chaitanya Charan, Das or Prabhu. It just becomes very difficult. So once one devotee, I was doing a retreat at one place. So one devotee, one Western devotee, one young, not a devotee, she was becoming a devotee. Yes, finally she got my name, Chaitanya. So I said, how did you get the name? See, I thought of Tanya taking chai. So I thought there is Sandhi Vigraha in Sanskrit, but nobody will think of this Sandhi Vigraha. So now in Western outreach, I introduce myself as Charan. So now we have our spiritual name. Those spiritual names have value. But then is it something which we have to impose on everyone at all times? Maybe, maybe not. So my thing is that broadly speaking, there are multiple ways to go toward Krishna. We may be inspired to go towards Krishna in a particular way. But that doesn't mean everybody has to be inspired. We have to insist that everybody has to go to Krishna in that way. Does that address your question?
Yeah, me too. Alicia, I really appreciate your point on how ultimately Krishna consciousness isn't about changing our culture or narrow down into a specific culture. Also, how there is a tendency in human psychology for those who find a specific thing to be very important to, there's a tendency to devalue other people who don't
Exactly,
find
yeah.
the principle as important. And
Yeah.
also I really liked your point about how we need to take Srila Prabhupada's statements in context. And also, I really liked the small point you made that what Prabhupada mentions in his books are taken as like our primary command.
Yeah, true. Thank you. It's a good summary of this. So I won't say culture is not important because the word culture can also have different meanings. I would say that sattvic culture is required. But in the West also there can be sattvic, rajasic and tamasic culture can be there. In India also, there is so much rampant alcoholism is there. And somebody said that is Indian culture. You say, I saw when, where was I? I think it was in California somewhere. Is it okay? It was like a, what was it? It was a shop. It was vintage Indian winery. And what was that? They said there are various kinds of bhangs over there. and various brands of Indian liquor are over there. So now Indian culture there can also be sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. We may not call the tamasic as Indian culture, but it is present in India in some ways. So in the West also there can be something sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. So I would say change of culture is required in the sense that we need a sattvic way of living. But what is a sattvic way of living does not have to necessarily conform to specific externals. Okay. Yes, any other questions? Yes, where is the mic?
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for coming back to Naperville. Just so very grateful to have your association. I have a couple questions. One, how would you distinguish the Swajatiya or like-minded association that you were talking about versus cliquish mentality or
about with cultish?
Or cliquish, like
cliquish
making
mentality, okay. So, yeah, it's a good question. A good question is a polite way of saying that I'll have to think about the answer. Okay. I see mainly two things. Is it what is our attitude towards others? That is it that we start devaluing, deriding, demonizing others? That's one key thing. That when the word inclusivity has become very much monopolized by the left in India and in the West, and because of the right often criticizes the idea of inclusivity sometimes. But in the Vedic tradition, it was very inclusive. That different people can practice bhakti in different ways or practice spirituality in different ways. So, if we are not dismissive about others, then that is very important. So that now, actually, I was going to speak this point. See, in our tradition, if you consider, we are a part of the Gaudiya tradition. And here itself, we'll see the committed but not fanatical. We'll see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he went on South India tour, he meets two devotees of Ram. One devotee of Ram, he's chanting the names of Ram, and after meeting Mahaprabhu, he starts chanting Krishna's names. And that is glorified by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Another devotee, he's so devoted to Lord Ram that he's unable to bear the thought that Sita was abducted by Ram. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he doesn't even serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu properly, he doesn't prepare food because he's so much agitated. And Mahaprabhu doesn't take offense that he didn't serve me food. Mahaprabhu sees his concern, finds a copy of the Kurma Puran, and comes back to show him that actually what was abducted was not Sita but Maya Sita. And there is no description that after this, he becomes a Krishna Bhakta and starts chanting Hare Krishna. Mahaprabhu is happy with his chanting Ram names. Now, in Mahaprabhu's associates also, Murari Gupta was a devout follower of, a worshipper of Lord Ram, and Mahaprabhu appreciates him. But at the same time, so in one sense, we have Murari Gupta, who is an intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya, and his Rama Bhakti is not a disqualification for him. At the same time, Murari Gupta does not become an initiating guru in our tradition. We have the Gadadhar Parivar is there. We have the Advaita Parivar is there. We have the Nityananda Parivar is there. So basically Nityananda Vamsha, Advaita Vamsha is there. Gadadhar Parivar, it is said. Gadadhar did not get married, so he didn't have children. So it's more of his disciples and followers were there. So there is a certain amount of variation specificity that will be there. So I would say cliquish would be where we become dismissive about others completely. And also another aspect of cliquish is that we keep everything intentionally secret. So I think we may not want to publicize to everyone what we are doing, but we don't have to conceal also. Unless there is a particular reason for concealing, which is a valid reason. Otherwise, if those two things are not there, then we can be like-minded while being respectful for others in their own way that they are moving toward Krishna. Okay? Thank you.
And the second one is a personal question, Prabhu. I noticed that this introduction was just finished on May 3rd of this year, and this book is copyrighted in 2025. So every time you come, you bring these new books. Mm-hmm. So you're a prolific writer, a traveling preacher. I hear your classes online. I'm just wondering if there's some principles of time management or scheduling your time that you follow that could benefit us.
When I find out, I'll let you know. My life is chaotic creativity. So it is that when I get inspired, I just focus on something and do it. And other times, if not inspired, then ideas can stagnate for a long time also. So basically, without writing and speaking, I am an unemployed brahmachari. Yes, true.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I'll echo my wife's comments. It's really nice to be with you again. Thank you so much for coming. So this is a big topic and something that personally I've thought about also. I wanted to share a couple of things and also seek your reflections on them. So first is a quote from the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, which I think is on point. And this is a explanation by Madhvacharya on his commentary on what is a Kanishta Adhikari. So he says, so he gives a Sanskrit, he says, a Kanishta Adhikari has no idea that the Supreme Lord has the power to exist outside a church or temple. Furthermore, being puffed up by his own ceremonial worship, a Kanishta Adhikari cannot imagine that anyone is more pious or religious than he. And he is not even aware that other devotees are more advanced. Thus, he cannot understand the Madhyama Uttama standard of devotional service, and sometimes, because of false pride, he criticizes the more advanced devotees of the Lord, neglects them, or simply has no understanding of their exalted positions as preachers or completely self-realized souls when they may deviate from, let's say, certain rituals or ways of living. That was one thing. And the other comment
very apt
was...
Quote. Thank you. Very apt quote. Thank you.
Okay. The other comment is, I don't know if you've heard this series from Ravindra Swarup Prabhu on the cure of souls.
Yeah.
And he makes a very interesting point that from Antoine Boisin, I think is the name, the person that he studied, that often when we get very attached to our rituals or how it's supposed to manifest Krishna consciousness, how we manifest Krishna consciousness, that often we're substituting for a lacking that we have in some other areas of our life. So it's an interesting psychological perspective on it, that because of lacking of sticking to principle, that we substituted for, I'm waking up so early in the morning and therefore I am a good devotee kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the Utsahamai stage in the Anartha Nivritti stage. Utsahamai is we profess a lot of enthusiasm about something. But that enthusiasm is more for public exhibition than for a personal connection with Krishna. Like, if I'm chanting in public, I'll be super attentive. I'll not even consider sleeping. But if I'm chanting in private, it is more napping than chanting, isn't it? So that Utsahamaya stage is there. That yes, sometimes we try to substitute the lack of authentic spiritual connection and the joy that comes from there with some kind of recognition, prestige, position in the outer world. Now, it may not be an ulterior motive over there, but just that the excessive show of enthusiasm for something is a compensation mechanism.
There may be a need for being accepted by a community, and so if I'm motivated to follow certain rituals very strongly, it gives me a sense that now I may be more accepted, and there may be some more deeper things going on there. Yeah.
Definitely, if we all want to be accepted, we all want to be respected, and naturally we will try to do those things which will get us to be accepted or respected. And that's why, in a community, when the leaders glorify certain devotees, and everybody will want to do like that, and that is good. But the thing is that others should not feel devalued. I had gone to one particular community, and the devotees told me that, the leaders told me, can you speak on this topic of how all services are equal for Krishna? And that whether somebody is leading kirtan or doing puja or giving class or clean the vessels or clean the temple, all are equal services for Krishna. So I gave a class on the topic, and then one of the audiences says, "How there have been 3 preachers who have come, and all 3 have spoken on the same topic." So sometimes what may happen is that there may be there is a natural appreciation for the particular kind of service. And now, through philosophical understanding also, we may want to emphasize a particular point. But when we are emphasizing it, it also has to be, the philosophical education also has to be supported by the cultural value that is created over there. So if in a project, book distribution is emphasized a lot, that's wonderful. But then, if book distribution is emphasized so much that nobody wants to do deity worship only, nobody wants to cook for the deities, then we don't want so much overemphasis of one activity. So we need to understand that there are many ways to be Krishna conscious. Okay? Thank you. Yes, Mataji. Okay. Yes, please. There. Haribol. Sorry.
I just wanted to express my deep, heartfelt gratitude for you, Prabhu, to always remember us and come to Naperville and give us your association as well as your deep insight into the scriptures. Your love for us is unlimited, and I want to thank you on behalf of the entire community. And this book, the moment I picked up in my hand, I fell in love with this. I'm so very grateful because I quickly went through all these, the entire book, all the verses, and I can see that your exposure to the whole world of Krishna consciousness, because you travel everywhere and you are seeing everything. And this is like a culmination of the incorporating the prayer component to everything that is happening in devotees' lives. And I felt like you can have 10 hours of lecture, but just reading one of these verses and contemplating on it is more enriching and beneficial than we can sit here and talk and argue and discuss or whatever. But that's the quality I'm seeing in this book. I'm nobody. Actually, I don't have the capacity to even fully appreciate, but I admire this so much. It reminded me of one book which I read a long time ago. I forgot the name of it, but it was from a Christian saintly person, I think so many centuries ago, who wrote devotional reflections, and this reminded me of that as well. And I really wanted to thank you so much. I have no words to express my gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I also look forward to coming here, and I feel the community over here is very enthusiastic, and that is a testament to your stewardship also, Mataji. So it's a in many ways, I think Naperville is one of the most vibrant communities in North America, and it is growing wonderfully. And you already have a temple, you will have more, but the bond that is there among the devotees, that's very nice to see over here. I always look forward to coming here. And thank you for your kind words about the book. Yes, sometimes I feel that, with respect to that Christian point, let's say that in Christianity, there is not much knowledge about the specifics of the personality of God. And that is a deficiency, but because Christianity has been around for centuries, millennia now, they have leveraged their strengths the most. So because they do not have knowledge about the activities of God in His kingdom, they have analyzed and contemplated a lot on how God acts in our life, or how to see God's action in our life. And there is a prayer app called Hallow, which is just only about prayer, not mindfulness, not meditation, not nature sounds. It's only biblical prayer, and that's become one of the top 25 apps in Google Play stores. So this ethos of prayers, and it's not just Christians who take it, others also take the prayers. So I think this prayers as a way of connecting with Krishna and especially personally composing our prayers and seeing how the prayers can relate with our life, that is a hugely undertapped pathway in bhakti in our tradition right now, or in our movement, we could say right now. This is my small attempt. Thank you for your kind words. I see that as your blessings and your encouragement. I try to do more in this direction. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Is that clapping the signal for end of the class? Thank you. Thank you so much. My heart is just so full of gratitude. Particularly these reflections I have been reading. I mean, your Gita articles, they're like my day's lifeline. And earlier it used to provide a lot of intellectual stimulation and a perspective to see the world around work, devotees, or at home. Now, in addition to that intellectual stimulation and shifting the perspective, it's just deeply moving the heart, much closer to Krishna and the process. So thank you. Immense gratitude to you for that. And so freely sharing. I mean, you could just be, okay, I'm happy with my meditation. But you just give it out so wonderfully. And thank you so much for this very wonderful and much needed presentation, probably for each one of us. I just wanted to understand a little bit about this emphasis on the principles and details. So you're mentioning about we want the firmness of those principles, otherwise we can just be chaotic and go anywhere. So my understanding, Prabhu, was initially we need to have that firmness. Like I have heard this example of a small sapling, we actually protect it just until it becomes strong enough, and then the flexibility can come or the details can vary. But as you gave that example of a young devotee spitting the modak, I was thinking, how do we, for our own life or for someone whom we are extending, how do we bring this into life?
Yeah. So is it that we, thank you for your kind words initially, and yeah, it's a, I don't see, I gave some broad principles, but eventually each one of us has to face challenges in individual situations, and we have to deal with those challenges. And sometimes we make a mess, and that's just a part of life of learning and growing. So yes, for younger devotees, is it that initially they need to be firm and later on flexibility can come? That was one way of traditional approach. That means, say, in the traditional Gurukuls, say for example in India, the Advaitic tradition, the Dvaitic tradition, the Sri Vaishnava tradition. These are three big traditions in South India, for example. Now, the way they would do it is that initially, if your students go to Gurukul, they would read books only of that tradition and become fully grounded in that tradition. And then after that, now they would read books of other traditions to understand their perspectives and then to counter their perspectives. And at the same time, there was a sense of balance was there. So like Advaitic and Dvaitic scholars would debate fiercely, and like quite heavy debates would be there. But yet there would be a basic level of mutual cultural respect. So if an Advaitic sannyasi is traveling and if there's no Advaita monastery, that Advaita sannyasi would come to Advaita monastery and they would very respectfully receive him over there. And if, say, a Advaitic scholar would go to a Advaitic place for a debate, now when they would come for a debate, even if that person is defeated, they would give him dakshina. And if somebody is visiting, they would give more dakshina. So that culture of respect was always there. And even in the Gurukul also, what it was that it was not that the Gurukul was only for teaching that sect's teachings. There would be different subjects. There would be Sanskrit, there's Sanskrit grammar, there could be Chanda, and so many other subjects are there. And you would we learn those things. Now, every tradition would naturally want to bring in the values of their tradition. But generally, it is that, say, we have Jiva Goswami went to Varanasi to learn Sanskrit. That was like what you could call it now, might call Cambridge or Oxford or something like that. So he went there, and that was also, Prabhupada said Varanasi is the Vrindavan of the Mayavadis. That's where all Mayavadis would be there. Now when he would go there, what would happen is that they would also teach some Mayavad, but when they would focus on Vyakaran, they would teach Vyakaran. So in that sense, they're having that sense of perspective. What is to be taught where, that is also there. So what has happened to some extent for us is that two changes are there. First is that we may emphasize only the firmness and we will not emphasize the flexibility at all. And that can become a serious problem. The other thing is that it's not really possible today to live in an insulated environment. Especially after the pandemic, when spiritual outreach, not just for us but everyone, has become very democratized in the sense that anybody can produce content, anybody can share content, anybody can be exposed to any content. So I'm not sure whether telling people to restrict their exposure to certain things alone is helpful. So maybe from the beginning itself we need to have a more nuanced approach. So it is not that, say, if our children are there, we can teach them only Vedic values, and when they grow older, they will learn about the Western culture or the presence of other faiths or whatever, or even other ways of approaching life. Now they are going to be exposed to that right from the beginning itself, in the school, in the colleges. So at what stage should we ourselves expose them and provide them some framework by which they can make sense of those things? So I think that approach of linearly categorizing firmness initially and flexibility afterwards will not work. Because, say, in a traditional context, that particular kind of setting would not occur. Because the parents would also be Vaishnavas and the organization would also be, the Sampradaya would also be Vaishnava. Then it would not be, that kind of incompatibility would not happen. But it's not like that in today's world. So that's why a certain level of education about how to approach different paths and how to be sensitive and respectful, that is important right from the beginning. Okay. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.